Why make gardening harder than you have to? We certainly like to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we really do.
Well, I have just changed my mind so much, I guess, in the garden that I have slowed myself down on accident. Like the orchard could have been fully planted out. Remember when I built that whole spreadsheet, the Epic Orchard Tracker?
That's right.
And then promptly, to be fair to myself, I
filled in a lot of it.
filled in a lot of it, but I didn't fully decide everything and source everything in that first year, which would have been, I guess, 2 years ago. So it would have been smarter to do that because then my citrus would be all at the same height right now, where it is not. I'd have probably the whole front yard with like a nice winding pathway.
Yeah, we've talked about that one a bit.
Yeah, so I wish I planned it out more, but it kind of all speaks to these areas of the garden that you want to have just a little bit easier for you. So going with perennials.
Yeah, perennials are something that I think we're both starting to understand the appeal of.
Yeah.
Because it's like, your artichoke patch, that looks great for a lot of the year.
Most of the year.
Not growing, at least it's covered in mulch, then you had sunflowers in it. Mm-hmm. But then once the sunflowers are gone, the artichokes are back, and you don't have to plant them.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you. The whole idea of making it harder by only growing annuals is, it's a bit of a game. A lot of us do it just because we have space limitations. But adding more perennials will just make the garden easier by having not just those easier harvests like those artichokes, but I think also more long-term beauty. That's something that both of us, I think, have started to appreciate more.
I don't think I was that good at it before. So now we've got a orange bract bougainvillea.
Looks really good.
On the chimney outside, which has been trellised up. And so I think, honestly, probably by like mid-spring next year, that thing will be going off.
Yeah.
Because those grow pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then I put some trellises on the actual wall near the artichoke patch at the homestead, and I've put in mandevilla vine.
That's right, yeah.
Which hasn't really taken so well. It's not dead, but it's just growing really slow.
Yeah.
We transplanted it end of summer, and it doesn't get a lot of sun there. So I figured it could handle that, but it probably won't thrive. But once it's established, it'll at least be full. Because you brought up that just adding fullness to the garden is important.
Yeah, there's definitely like these times like right now where we transition into that winter garden and it just feels empty.
In my case, my backyard's literally empty.
Yeah, so having even just like maybe a row or a little pop here and there of some perennials, like I wish we could have more rhubarb, but it doesn't like the heat.
I've struggled with rhubarb before. I did plant it once in that artichoke area, and it just kind of just went blah and didn't really do anything. So we'll have to see. But are you getting more into perennial edibles than you are perennial ornamentals, or kind of trying to do both?
I feel like I'm ready to start doing some more purely ornamentals because I like having a source of not just beauty, but also just having flowers for the pollinators, things like that. Something that will have year-round interest, even when I'm cycling out the garden or just planting things. I want a little bit of height, a little bit of contrast, like you were talking previously. If you have everything just growing at the same time, at the same height, it just looks a little bit stale and boring.
It looks like a farm.
Yeah. So I think like this year, for example, I put in some hollyhocks. And I did not realize that they get like 10 feet tall, but it looks good.
Those guys get huge. Well, you snuck a couple into one of my beds once, and they're still sitting there.
Yep.
And I have to say, they're pretty nice.
Yeah, and my Shasta daisy was by far my biggest, most beautiful like flowering bush that I had by far this year. But it also took up a massive chunk of the garden.
Well, you also have the strawflower patch that you've had for a couple of years, which I don't believe is a true perennial, but it's like a self-sowing annual. To me, I'm just going to say it, a self-sowing annual to me is a perennial. That's kind of how I feel. I know botanically that's not correct, but from the purposes of decreasing your labor and getting beauty in the same space, checks those boxes. So to me, that kind of counts. But yeah, I'd like to get into, I have to say, like the passion fruit being on my water cistern that's completely covered now. That's a perennial. Wild. And to me, I'd prefer that because not only do you get the beautiful flowers, but you also get the fruit. So that's kind of like a super win. Artichoke's another big win. Obviously, an orchard is a huge win. I think the thing I'm missing, not without lack of trying, would be my berries, my whole world of berries. And so raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, I've just struggled with in this climate. And the only thing I really have that's even close would be the grapevines that went in this year. And I think those will actually look really nice because those have taken.
They will definitely look nice.
Yeah, and you got one that's going on pretty well.
I had this one, and it has vines in either direction, maybe 20 feet long.
Yeah,
which is
that's
insane.
just insane. And that's just one.
Yeah,
I planted 4, and they're each 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to do some pruning, I think. If they act like yours, I'm going to have to do some pruning.
That's one thing that surprised me is how much pruning it actually does need. So I guess it's not a little less work. It does some work. because if you don't prune it, it gets powdery mildew and then you get sad.
Well, yeah, but it's different than the routine of digging it up over and over and over again and replanting, which I think for my raised bed garden, that's probably always how I'm going to operate the raised bed garden, with the exception of perhaps an herb garden that's hot swapped out and never fully cleared, probably. Yeah. Or maybe like a medicinal style garden that's a similar approach.
That's true. My first birdies bed is actually an herb bed that I put in on my patio.
Yeah.
And
you don't full clear it.
I never full clear it. Yeah. I like pull things out as they end, and then I cycle in. I have a couple perennial things like the pineapple sage that looks wonderful. Mm-hmm. But I also have, fortunately, some things that were already on my plot that everybody loves, like the Pride of Madeira wall out on the back, and it just shoots up all these big purple spires of flowers. And the bees go crazy. So I know that it's worth it, and it adds that beauty.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
choosing
for my pond, right? Like, we did most of the perennials. It's mostly perennials around the pond. Now, some of them haven't really taken. Like, we lost I think we actually lost most of the English thyme by now, which is unfortunate. As the ground cover, we basically lost all the ground covers, and we lost the leptospermum tree, which was kind of was actually the biggest piece.
Centerpiece.
Yeah, the Pride of Madeira, though, was small, and now that one's really grown in. It looks great. And it's grown in more of a shrubby style than some of the like larger ones. Because who knows how old the ones you are that you've got
literally no idea.
They could be like 20 years old.
Yeah, and they get like 8 to 10 feet when they're fully flowering.
Yeah, and you cut out one entirely, didn't you? Yeah, I think that was probably the right move.
I have so many, and they're kind of like a weed here. So
yeah.
I like it. And then for the pond, it also makes sense because then you don't want to just constantly be maintaining it.
Why would you?
Working around it.
Well, if you think about it, because the aquascapes guy did such a good job on the pond, it looks natural.
Yeah.
And Greg Whitsock, who's one of the owners of Aquascapes, when he came back, he was like, "You've got a Ferrari with like a Dodge Caravan exterior." So he's like trashing me for not landscape, which is totally fair because I really
That's a great analogy.
And so I landscaped inside the pond. I guess aquascaped inside the pond, but we did not landscape outside. So we did that project with, I think, Petco. Where we launched and landscaped. And I'd say 50-60% took, which is really good. But you're right. Like now I just don't have to worry about certain areas. I'm like, that's always going to be a pride spot. It looks really nice.
Yeah. And I think the main thing we messed up there is we just did it at the hottest time of year.
Yeah, if we did it like June, so
if we did it like right now, it'll probably be fine. But most of it is fine, and it did grow a lot.
Most of it's fine, and most of it looks good, and we'll be cranking probably by spring.
I agree. I think I would love to hear from everyone who's listening. What are some nice edible perennials you guys would recommend that maybe we're not thinking of?
Yeah, sure.
I have artichokes, I have asparagus, passion fruit, grapes, a couple berries. But there's got to be something else, some sleeper delicious kind of perennial out there. I'd love to know.
Watch the full episode right here and subscribe for more new episodes every single week.